Chapter 2 of Canada and Newfoundland by Frank G. Carpenter. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Betty B. The Key to the St. Lawrence. Imagine yourself aboard ship with me. We are steaming along the coast of Newfoundland, bound north for St. John's, the capital and chief port of the oldest and smallest British Dominion. Just before daybreak this morning, I was awakened by a glaring light flashing full in my face. I jumped from my berth and looked out of the porthole. As I did so, 3 blasts from the whistle tore the air and made the ship tremble, and were answered a moment later by the whang of a foghorn from over the water. The dazzling light that awakened me flashed around again. I knew then that we were saluting Cape Race, the southeast tip of Newfoundland and chief signal station for the ocean traffic of the North Atlantic. We were hardly a mile from shore. If it had been daylight, we would have steamed closer in. The lighthouse towered high in the air, the flash seeming to come from out of the sky. Cape Race Light is more than 300 feet above the water, and with its foghorn and the wireless station close by, tells thousands of mariners their position at sea. It is usually the first land sighted in coming to Canada across the Atlantic, and marks the point where practically every vessel in these waters changes its course. Day has dawned since we passed Cape Race, and we can see for miles over the bright blue ocean, silvered and dancing under the sun. The air is so fresh and crisp, it is almost intoxicating. Even the dolphins, leaping and diving in graceful curves beside the ship, seem to share our feeling that it is a wonderful morning on which to be alive and at sea. Now turn to the map in this book and see just where we are. Like most Americans, I had always thought of Newfoundland as a subarctic country far to the north of us. Since leaving New York, I have felt like an explorer on his way to the pole. The fact is, however, that we have been steaming much more to the east than to the north, and are at this moment only about 1,600 miles from the west coast of Ireland. We have come hardly 300 miles north of New York, but so far to the eastward that we are halfway to Liverpool. We are still south of England, in the same latitude as Paris, and are not far from the shoals that form the Grand Banks of Newfoundland, famous the world over as cod fishing grounds. Here the bed of the ocean rises to within less than 500 feet of the surface, and the cold Arctic currents meet the Gulf Stream, causing the fogs so much dreaded in this part of the Atlantic. As seen on the map, Newfoundland is a triangle of land that nearly fills, like a plug, the gaping mouth of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, but it also commands the sea routes of the North Atlantic, and its possession by an enemy power would menace both Canada and the United States. It has an area of 42,000 square miles, being larger than Ireland and of about the same size as Tennessee. At first glance it seems a part of the mainland, but a closer look shows the Strait of Belle Isle separating the island from the Labrador coast. Though in some places only 8 or 10 miles wide, this strait furnishes a summertime passage for transatlantic liners to Canada. For some years there has been talk of building a dam across the Strait of Belle Isle to stop the icy waters of the Labrador current coming through the strait into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. This, it is claimed, would force the Gulf Stream closer to Newfoundland and give that country and eastern Quebec a climate as warm as that of New Jersey. How England would fare in this shifting of ocean waters, no one could say. The history of the world would have been vastly different but for the present course of the Gulf Stream in relation to the British Isles. However, no one has yet offered to pay for this project, and shipping men say it would be impossible to make a dam strong enough to withstand the enormous pressure of ice which comes down from the Arctic every year in great flows of from 500 to 1,000 square miles, and sometimes piles up on shore to the height of a 5-story building. The Newfoundland coast greatly resembles that of Norway. Looking shoreward, we see great headlands jutting out into the ocean, their precipitous sides rising straight out of the water for 300 or 400 feet. Between them are deep bays and inlets, walled with sheer rock. At the heads of the coves and smaller bays, we can see the white houses of little villages, clinging to the hillsides above tiny beaches. On top, these great rock ridges are covered with low scrub, now in red and brown autumn dress. Now we are approaching St. John's, which has one of the famous natural harbors of the world. Our steamer heads for what seems an unbroken wall of rock, 500 feet high and surmounted by a mighty stone tower. This is Cabot Tower, erected to commemorate the discovery of Newfoundland in 1497 by John Cabot, the Venetian mariner commissioned by Henry VII of England to find him new dominions. Except for the Vikings 5 centuries earlier, Cabot was really the first to discover the North American continent, as Columbus did not reach the mainland until some years later. Just south of the Cabot Tower is Cape Spear, the farthest east point of all North America. It was on these hills that Marconi received the first wireless message flashed across the Atlantic, and from them that the first transatlantic hydroplane flight was begun. On these shores also, several of our transatlantic cables are landed. But see, there's an opening in the wall of rock straight ahead, and we get a glimpse of the harbor and the city beyond. The passage is only 600 feet wide, and it seems much less from the deck of our steamer. Here, the French, during their brief possession of St. John's, slung chains across the Narrows to prevent the entrance of enemy ships. Inside the Narrows, the harbor is about a mile long and 1/2 as wide. It is fringed with a forest of masts and the smokestacks of steamers. On the right is St. John's. The hill on which it is built rises so steeply from the water that we can see the whole sides of buildings, one above the other along the terraced streets. The painted brick or wooden structures give the city a rather drab appearance, which is emphasized by the absence of shade trees. This is partly because the town has been burned 3 times, the last time in 1892. Across the harbor, the red and brown hillside is gashed here and there with the slate gray of stone pits or splotched with fenced-in patches of green, so steep that it is hard to imagine how they are farmed. St. John's is not quite as large as Portland, Maine, but it is the chief city of Newfoundland and the center of the fishing trade. The whole country has only about 250,000 inhabitants. It is as though the people of Toledo formed the total population of the state of Ohio. The Newfoundlanders are a mixture of English, Irish, and Scotch, with an occasional trace of French. The original Indian inhabitants have practically all disappeared. Most of the people worship at the Church of England, though Catholics also are numerous. Both denominations have cathedrals at St. John's, the Catholic edifice being especially conspicuous as viewed from the harbor. The Methodist Church is well established, and there is a sprinkling of Congregationalists. Education in Newfoundland is sectarian, each church receiving a grant from the government for the support of its schools. There is much rivalry between the churches, especially in the villages, but I am told that some of the Protestants send their children to Catholic schools, considering them better. The sons and daughters of well-to-do people usually go to England to complete their education. End of chapter 2.